The bitter January rain soaked through Emma Roberts' worn-out sneakers as she counted the last $10 in her wallet, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. With 2 days until payday and barely enough gas to get to work, that crumpled bill was all that stood between her and an empty kitchen cabinet. But what happened next would prove that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as our hardest choices. The neon lights of Pete's Diner cast a harsh glow across the wet sidewalk as Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. The evening rush hour traffic crawled past, windshield wipers keeping time with her heartbeat as she mentally calculated her budget for the 100th time that day. Her phone buzzed with another text from Tom, her landlord, reminding her that rent was already 3 days late. She'd been picking up extra shifts at the diner, but tips had been sparse since the holidays ended, and her car's check engine light had been blinking for weeks. The sound of a harsh cough caught her attention. There, huddled in the narrow alcove, between the diner and the old bookstore, sat an elderly woman Emma had never seen before. Her gray hair was neatly combed despite her circumstances, and her clothes, though worn, were clean. What struck Emma most was the woman's eyes, clear blue and alert, yet filled with a sadness that seemed to reach right into Emma's chest and squeeze. Mary Thompson, as the neat handwriting on her cardboard sign read, had been sitting in that spot since early afternoon. "Need food and warm drink. God bless," the sign said simply. No elaborate story, no desperate plea. Just those few words written in careful letters that spoke of better days. Emma's fingers touched the $10 bill in her pocket. She thought of her empty refrigerator, the quarter tank of gas that needed to last until Friday, and the box of store-brand macaroni and cheese that was supposed to be dinner. Linda, her co-worker, had warned her just yesterday about the increasing number of scammers in the area. "Don't be naive," she'd said, shaking her head at Emma's tendency to help others despite her own struggles. But something about Mary was different. Maybe it was the way she pulled her thin blanket around her shoulders with dignified grace, or how she smiled and nodded at passing people, even when they pretended not to see her. Whatever it was, Emma felt a connection she couldn't explain. Before she could second-guess herself, Emma walked into Pete's Diner. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and Mike, the night cook, called out a greeting. 5 minutes later, she emerged with a large styrofoam cup of hot coffee and a warm sandwich wrapped in foil. "Excuse me," Emma said softly, approaching Mary. "I thought you might like something warm." She held out the coffee and sandwich along with her last $10. "The nights are getting colder." Mary looked up, those clear blue eyes widening slightly. "Oh, dear heart," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle and well-spoken. "You're shivering yourself. You shouldn't." "Please," Emma insisted, setting the items down beside her. "Everyone needs help sometimes." A tear rolled down Mary's weathered cheek as she accepted the offerings. "Thank you, sweet girl. May God bless your generous heart." Emma walked away quickly, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety about how she'd manage until payday. Yet somehow, despite the rain and the cold and the uncertainty, she felt a warmth in her chest that no empty wallet could diminish. What Emma Roberts couldn't know as she hurried home that evening was that her simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others in ways she could never imagine. That night, sleep eluded Emma as she tossed and turned in her small studio apartment. The radiator clanked and sputtered, struggling to keep the winter chill at bay. Her phone's screen illuminated the darkness every few hours as she checked her bank account balance, hoping somehow the numbers would magically change. $487. Barely enough for a cup of coffee, let alone the gas she needed to get through the week. Linda's voice echoed in her head. "You're too soft-hearted, Emma. Always trying to save everyone else while you can barely keep yourself afloat." Her friend meant well, but Emma couldn't shake the image of Mary's clear blue eyes, the quiet dignity in her posture, the way her hands had trembled slightly as she accepted the warm coffee. Around 3 a.m., Emma finally drifted off, only to be startled awake by the buzz of her ancient alarm clock what felt like minutes later. The morning light filtered through her threadbare curtains, casting long shadows across the water stain on her ceiling. She had exactly enough time to walk to work. Driving would waste precious gas she couldn't afford to use. The morning shift at Pete's Diner was busier than usual. Emma moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile never faltering despite her exhaustion. Her feet ached in her worn-out shoes, and her stomach growled quietly. She'd skipped breakfast, knowing she needed to stretch her remaining food until payday. "You look dead on your feet, honey," said Mrs. Martinez, a regular who always ordered the same breakfast, 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast. "Everything okay?" Emma assured her she was fine, but Mrs. Martinez's concerned gaze followed her as she hurried back to the kitchen. Mike, the cook, slid a plate of toast across the counter to her during her break. "On the house," he insisted, turning back to the grill before she could protest. "Can't have my best waitress fainting on the job." As her shift wound down, Emma couldn't help but glance out the window at the spot where Mary had been the night before. The alcove was empty now, the cardboard sign gone, only a flattened portion of cardboard showing where she had sat. Emma felt a pang of worry. Had Mary found somewhere warm to sleep? Had the sandwich been enough? "Roberts!" Tom Bennett's voice cut through her thoughts. Her landlord was sitting at the counter, his usual scowl in place. Emma's heart sank. She'd been avoiding his calls about the late rent. "Need to talk to you about that payment." But before Tom could continue, the diner's door chimed. A tall man in a police uniform entered, looking around with purpose. Emma's first thought was that something had happened to Mary. Maybe she'd been hurt, or worse. The officer approached the counter, and Emma noticed his name tag read, Officer Wilson. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying authority but also a hint of warmth. "I'm looking for someone named Emma Roberts." Emma stepped forward, her heart pounding. "That's me, officer. Is everything all right?" Officer Wilson's expression softened. "You helped an elderly woman outside this diner last night?" The entire diner seemed to go quiet. Even Tom Bennett stopped mid-bite of his burger to listen. Emma nodded slowly, her throat tight. "Yes, Mary Thompson. Is she okay?" The officer pulled out a small notebook. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me exactly what happened during your interaction with her. Every detail you can remember." As Emma recounted the events of the previous evening, she noticed Officer Wilson taking careful notes. Her co-workers had gathered nearby, and even the kitchen staff had paused their work to listen. The simple act of kindness she'd performed suddenly felt heavy with unexpected significance. "And this was all you gave her?" Officer Wilson asked, his pen poised above his notebook. "The coffee, sandwich, and $10? "Yes," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wish I could have done more, but..." Officer Wilson closed his notebook and looked at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ms. Roberts, I need you to come with me to the station. There's something you need to know about Mary Thompson." The diner erupted in whispered conversations. Linda appeared at Emma's side, squeezing her arm supportively. "I'll cover the rest of your shift," she offered, concern evident in her voice. As Emma gathered her things, she caught snippets of speculation from the customers. Had Mary been dangerous? Was she involved in something criminal? The $10 suddenly seemed to carry the weight of something much more significant than its monetary value. "Don't worry," Officer Wilson assured her, noticing her anxious expression as they stepped out into the cold morning air. "You're not in any trouble. In fact..." He paused, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I think you're about to understand why they say no good deed goes unnoticed." The police station buzzed with activity as Officer Wilson led Emma through a maze of desks and busy officers. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. The worn linoleum floors squeaked beneath her feet as they approached a door marked Detective Division. "Please take a seat," Officer Wilson gestured to a chair in what appeared to be a conference room. The walls were lined with awards and commendations, and a large window overlooked the city streets below. Emma noticed her hands were trembling slightly as she sat down. "Would you like some water?" a gentle voice asked. Emma turned to see a woman in her mid-50s entering the room, wearing a smart business suit. "I'm Detective Sarah Morrison. Thank you for coming in today, Emma." Before Emma could respond, the door opened again. This time, a tall man in an expensive suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. "Ms. Roberts," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm Jack Wilson. No relation to our good officer here." He smiled, setting his briefcase on the table. "I represent the Thompson Family Trust."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Emma's confusion must have shown on her face because Detective Morrison quickly added, "The woman you helped last night, Mary Thompson, she isn't exactly who you might have thought she was." Jack Wilson opened his briefcase and removed a photograph, sliding it across the table. Emma gasped. The picture showed a younger Mary Thompson, elegant and poised, standing in front of a large building with Thompson Memorial Hospital emblazoned across its facade. Mary Thompson was one of the city's most prominent philanthropists, Jack explained. She established the largest charitable foundation in the state, built 3 hospitals, and funded countless scholarship programs. But about 5 years ago, she noticed something that troubled her deeply. He paused, pulling out a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Thompson Foundation questions effectiveness of traditional charity models." Mary believed that true character reveals itself when no one is watching, Detective Morrison continued. She began a rather unconventional research project. With our department's knowledge and protection, she would spend nights in different parts of the city, disguised as a homeless person. Emma's mind reeled as the pieces began falling into place. But why? Jack smiled sadly. Mary had terminal cancer. She wanted her final charitable act to be identifying genuine kindness, people who would help others even when they had almost nothing themselves. People like you, Emma. The door opened once more, and Emma's heart nearly stopped. Mary Thompson entered, no longer in her street clothes, but wearing a simple yet elegant sweater and slacks. Her clear blue eyes were exactly as Emma remembered them, but now they sparkled with something that looked like pride. "Hello, Emma," Mary said softly, taking a seat across from her. "I believe I owe you an explanation, and so much more." Emma found herself speechless as Mary reached across the table and took her hand. "What you did last night, it wasn't just about the $10, the coffee, or the sandwich. It was about how you did it. You looked me in the eyes. You spoke to me with dignity. You gave your last bit of money without hesitation, even though I could see how much you were struggling yourself." Tears welled in Mary's eyes as she continued. "I've been doing this for months, Emma. Do you know how many people stopped? How many showed genuine kindness without expecting anything in return? Very few. But you were different." Jack. Wilson pulled out another document from his briefcase. "Mrs. Thompson has made a decision. The Thompson Foundation will be establishing a new program, the Emma Roberts Compassion Initiative. It will identify and support individuals who demonstrate exceptional kindness in their daily lives, providing them with the resources to expand their impact on the community." Emma's vision blurred with tears as Mary squeezed her hand. "You're going to be our first recipient, dear heart. The foundation will pay off your debts, provide you with a new car, and offer you a position as the program's first director. Your salary will be $75,000 a year, with full benefits." The room spun slightly as Emma processed the information. "But I just did what anyone would do," she whispered. Mary shook her head, her expression gentle but firm. "No, Emma. You did what everyone should do, but what very few actually would. You gave everything you had to help someone in need. Without questioning, without judgment, without expecting anything in return. That's the kind of person we need leading this initiative." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity that made Emma's head spin. Her tiny studio apartment, which had felt so cold and empty just days before, now buzzed with an energy she could hardly contain. Linda had screamed with joy when Emma called to share the news, and even Tom Bennett, her formerly stern landlord, had awkwardly congratulated her in the diner. "The foundation will need you to start as soon as possible," Jack Wilson explained during their meeting at the Thompson Foundation's downtown office. The building was impressive but not ostentatious, much like Mary herself. "We've already had the HR department prepare your paperwork, and we've arranged for temporary housing while you get settled." Emma sat in the plush office chair, still, struggling to process how dramatically her life had changed. Just days ago, she'd been counting pennies for gas. Now she was sitting in an office larger than her entire apartment, discussing her new role in changing other people's lives. "But what exactly will I be doing?" Emma asked, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that probably cost more than what she used to make in an hour of tips. "I mean, I want to help people, but I've never run anything like this before." Mary Thompson, who had insisted on being present for this meeting despite her doctor's protests, smiled warmly from her seat by the window. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this position, dear heart. You understand what it means to struggle, to face difficult choices, and to choose kindness even when it costs you everything." The implementation plan was both simple and revolutionary. The Emma Roberts Compassion Initiative would work differently than traditional charitable programs. Instead of just providing direct aid, it would identify and support people who, like Emma, demonstrated extraordinary kindness despite their own hardships. "Think of it as creating a ripple effect," Mary explained, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We're not just helping one person, we're empowering them to help others, who will then help even more people. It's kindness multiplied exponentially." As if to demonstrate this principle, Emma's first official act as director was to return to Pete's Diner. Mike, the cook who had slipped her free toast during her hardest times, was presented with a grant to open his own restaurant, with the condition that he provide free meals to those in need and job training for struggling single parents. Linda, who had covered Emma's shifts without complaint and supported her through countless difficult days, received a scholarship to finish her nursing degree. "But you have to promise to work in community healthcare," Emma told her tearfully, as they hugged. "Keep the kindness going." Even Mrs. Martinez, the regular customer who had always shown concern for Emma's well-being, wasn't forgotten. The foundation established a senior outreach program in her name, ensuring that elderly residents in their community would have access to warm meals and friendly companionship. But it was the moment Emma handed Tom Bennett, her former landlord, a proposal that truly showed how much she had grown into her role. "We want to convert the empty floor of your building into transitional housing," she explained, watching his expression shift from skepticism to interest. "The foundation will cover all renovation costs and will guarantee the rent. In return, you'll provide affordable housing to people working to get back on their feet." Tom studied the proposal, his usual gruff demeanor softening. "You know," he said finally, "I always knew you had something special about you, Roberts. Even when you were late with the rent, you never made excuses. You just kept trying your best." As Emma drove home that evening in her new car, a modest but reliable model she had chosen despite the foundation's offer of something more luxurious, she passed the spot where she had first met Mary. The alcove between the diner and the bookstore was empty now. But Emma smiled, remembering how a simple act of kindness had transformed not just her life, but an entire community. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mary. "Coming to visit tomorrow. The doctors say I need to rest, but I can't miss seeing what you're building. You've already exceeded my highest hopes." 6 months into her role as director of the Emma Roberts Compassion Initiative, Emma stood at the podium of the newly renovated Thompson Community Center. The audience before her represented a tapestry of lives transformed, former recipients who had become givers, struggling individuals who had found hope, and community leaders who had learned to see charity through a new lens. "When I gave my last $10 to a stranger on a cold January night," Emma began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I never imagined I'd be standing here today. But that's the magic of kindness. You never know how far its ripples will reach." In the front row, Mary Thompson sat in her wheelchair, thinner now, but her blue eyes still sharp and bright. Despite her declining health, she had insisted on attending this gathering. Jack Wilson stood protectively near her, while Officer Wilson, who had become a regular partner in their community outreach programs, watched from his position by the door. The initiative had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a simple idea had blossomed into a movement that was beginning to attract national attention. Local news stations had picked up their story, and just last week, a major network had reached out about doing a feature on their unique approach to community transformation. "But numbers and recognition aren't what matter," Emma continued, gesturing to the slides showing their program's impact. "What matters are the stories. Like Maria, a single mother who received help with childcare so she could finish her degree, and who now runs our after-school program. Or Mr. Chen, whose small grocery store was about to close until our business support program stepped in, and who now provides free groceries to families in crisis." The atmosphere in the room was electric with possibility. Representatives from 3 other cities had come to learn about their model, hoping to replicate it in their own communities. The Thompson Foundation had already pledged to support these expansions, ensuring that the ripple effect would continue to grow. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Emma had faced challenges and learned difficult lessons along the way. Some people had tried to take advantage of the program, leading to the development of better verification processes. Others had questioned whether helping individuals could really create systematic change. The truth is, Emma addressed these concerns directly, we're not just helping individuals. We're building a network of compassion. Every person we help becomes a node in that network, creating their own ripples of kindness. It's not charity in the traditional sense. It's community transformation from the inside out. After the presentation, as people mingled and shared stories over coffee and refreshments, Mary motioned for Emma to join her in a quiet corner of the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for Emma's, but her grip was still strong. "I need to tell you something," Mary said softly. "The doctors say I have about a month left." She held up her hand to stop Emma's protest. "No, dear heart, don't be sad. I've lived to see something remarkable take root and grow. Do you know what the best part is? It's not the program's success, or even the lives we've changed. It's watching you bloom into exactly who you were meant to be." Emma fought back tears as Mary continued. "The Foundation Board has unanimously voted to rename the initiative. From next month, it will be called the Thompson-Roberts Legacy Project. I want my name next to yours, Emma, because you've shown me that my vision for changing lives through kindness was possible. You just had to approach it with a pure heart and unwavering dedication." The evening wound down, but the energy in the room remained vibrant with possibility. As Emma helped Mary to her car, they passed the spot where they had first met. The alcove looked different now. The foundation had installed a small plaque there, marking it as the birthplace of their movement. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Mary said, pausing to look at the plaque. "I think about all the people who walked past me that night. The ones who looked away, who pretended not to see, who chose to keep their $10. They'll never know what they missed, not just the money or the opportunity, but the chance to be part of something bigger than themselves." 1 month later, Emma stood at Mary Thompson's memorial service, surrounded by hundreds of lives touched by their shared vision. The grand cathedral was filled to capacity, with people spilling out onto the steps outside. But this wasn't a typical memorial service. At Mary's specific request, It was being called a celebration of kindness. Instead of traditional mourning attire, attendees wore bright colors. Rather than flower arrangements, people had brought donations for various community programs. The atmosphere was bittersweet, but hopeful, exactly as Mary had wanted it to be. Mary Thompson taught me that kindness isn't just an action, it's a revolution. Emma began her eulogy, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed cathedral. She could have simply written checks or created traditional charitable programs. Instead, she chose to sit on a cold sidewalk on a winter night, looking for someone who would give their last $10 to help a stranger. The audience listened intently as Emma shared how Mary had spent her final weeks. Despite her failing health, she had insisted on meeting with every new recipient of the program's help, recording their stories and sharing her vision for the future. She had worked with the Foundation's board to ensure the Thompson-Roberts Legacy Project would continue to grow and evolve. The night before she passed, Emma's voice cracked slightly. Mary called me to her home. She was tired, but her eyes still had that spark of determination I'd come to know so well. She handed me an envelope and made me promise not to open it until after the memorial service. As Emma spoke, she could feel the weight of that envelope in her pocket. Mary's final message, still unread, waiting to share one last piece of wisdom or instruction. The thought both comforted and terrified her. But Mary's greatest gift wasn't what she gave to me or to any individual, Emma continued. It was showing us that true change doesn't come from grand gestures or massive donations, though those have their place. It comes from the small acts of kindness that ripple outward, touching life after life, creating connections that transform entire communities. After the service, Emma gathered with a small group in Mary's home office. Jack Wilson was there, along with Officer Wilson, Linda, Mike, and several board members. The room still felt charged with Mary's presence. Her reading glasses lay on the desk where she'd left them, a half-finished cup of tea still sitting on a coaster. With trembling hands, Emma opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small key. "My dearest Emma," the letter began in Mary's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, our journey together in this world has come to an end. But your journey, our journey, is far from over." The key enclosed opens a safe in my office. Inside, you'll find my personal journal spanning 50 years of philanthropic work and my vision for the future of our project. As Jack helped her open the safe, Emma found not only the journals but a USB drive and another envelope. The drive, Mary explained in her letter, contained video messages for future recipients of their program's help. She had recorded them in her final weeks, wanting to ensure her message of kindness would continue to inspire. The second envelope contained Mary's final instruction. The Thompson-Roberts Legacy Project isn't just about helping people, Emma. It's about changing how people think about kindness and community. I'm leaving you my controlling interest in the foundation. You're no longer just the director of our initiative. You're now the chairperson of the entire Thompson Foundation. Lead with your heart, just as you did that cold January night. Emma sank into Mary's office chair, overwhelmed by the responsibility and trust placed in her. But as she looked around at the supportive faces surrounding her, she realized something profound. She wasn't alone. Every person in that room represented a link in the chain of kindness that Mary had helped forge. "Mary once told me that kindness multiplies," Emma said, standing up with renewed determination. She believed that every act of compassion creates endless possibilities for change. Our work isn't just about the money or the programs. It's about proving that one person's choice to be kind, even when it's difficult, can transform countless lives. As the sun set outside Mary's office window, Emma could almost hear Mary's voice. "Remember, dear heart, no good deed goes unnoticed, and no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted." The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling, windows of the Thompson Foundation's newly opened second location. Emma stood at the window, a cup of coffee in hand, watching volunteers set up for today's special ceremony. 1 year had passed since Mary's memorial service, and the ripples of kindness she'd started had grown into waves of change. "Ms. Roberts?" Her assistant Sarah poked her head in. "They're ready for your final walkthrough of the new Kindness Innovation Center." Emma smiled at the title. The center had been her first major initiative as foundation chairperson, a place where Mary's vision and modern technology would merge to create something unprecedented. The building, once an abandoned warehouse, now stood as a beacon of hope in one of the city's most struggling neighborhoods. "The first group is already here," Sarah continued, checking her tablet, "including that young man you met last month, Danny Martinez." Danny's story had particularly touched Emma. Like her a year ago, he had given his last bit of money to help a stranger, not knowing his act of kindness was being observed by one of the Foundation's community scouts. But unlike her experience, with Mary, this was no test. It was the new way the Foundation identified genuine acts of compassion. The main hall of the Kindness Innovation Center buzzed with activity. Interactive displays showcased stories of lives transformed through acts of kindness. A massive digital wall traced the ripple effects of each good deed, how one person's compassion had touched dozens, then hundreds of lives. "Pretty amazing, isn't it?" Jack Wilson appeared beside Emma, now serving as the Foundation's chief legal advisor. Mary would have loved this. Emma nodded, touching the locket she wore, a gift from Mary she'd found in that safe a year ago. Inside was a simple message: "Keep the ripples going." "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma addressed the gathered crowd, which included Foundation staff, community leaders, and most importantly, the next generation of kindness ambassadors like Danny. "Welcome to the future of compassion." The lights dimmed, and Mary's face appeared on the main screen, one of her final recorded messages. "Kindness," her voice filled the room, "isn't just about giving money or help. It's about recognizing the dignity in every human being, about seeing someone's potential when they might have forgotten it themselves." Emma watched Danny's face as Mary's message played. She saw in his eyes the same mix of emotion she'd felt that day in the police station: disbelief, hope, and the dawning realization that one simple act of kindness could change everything. "The Thompson-Roberts Legacy Project has evolved," Emma continued after the video. "We're no longer just helping individuals. We're building a network of compassion that spans cities, states, and soon countries. Every person in this room represents a point of light in that network." She gestured to the digital wall where real-time data showed the project's impact. Over 10,000 lives directly improved, 500 small businesses saved, 1,000 students receiving education support, and countless acts of kindness inspired. "But numbers don't tell the real story," Emma smiled, inviting Danny to join her on stage. "People do. Danny, would you share your story?" The young man stepped forward, nervous but proud. 3 weeks ago, I had $7 to my name. I was walking home from my second job when I saw an elderly man trying to fix a flat tire. Those $7 bought him a hot meal while we waited for road service. I never expected. His voice cracked slightly. I never expected that helping him would lead to me standing here today. Emma squeezed his shoulder supportively. That's how kindness works. It reveals the best in us, and then multiplies. Danny will now help us identify and support other young people making a difference in their community. The ceremony continued with the official opening of the center's various departments: the Education Empowerment Wing, the Small Business Support Hub, the Community Health Initiative, and the Youth Leadership Program. Each one represented a different facet of Mary's vision, expanded and adapted for a new era. As the day wound down, Emma found herself back in her office, looking at a familiar spot between the old diner and bookstore, visible from her window. The plaque there had been joined by a small garden and bench, a place where people could rest and read about the story that started it all. Her phone buzzed with a text from Linda, who now ran the Foundation's healthcare programs. Mary would be so proud. Actually, she probably is proud, watching all this from somewhere. Emma smiled, touching the locket again. The foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined that cold January night, but its heart remained the same. The belief that kindness, when nurtured and multiplied, could transform the world. 2 years after the opening of the first Kindness Innovation Center, Emma found herself standing in front of the United Nations General Assembly. The Thomson-Roberts Legacy Project had captured international attention, and now representatives from countries around the world had gathered to learn about what media had dubbed the Kindness Revolution. It began with $10, Emma started, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Behind her, a massive screen displayed photos of Mary Thompson, the original Dinah, and the journey that had led to this global stage. But it was never about the money. It was about seeing the humanity in each person we meet. In the audience, Danny Martinez, now the project's youth programs director, sat alongside Jack Wilson and Linda. They had all flown in for this historic moment. The foundation's work had expanded beyond anything they could have imagined, with Kindness Innovation Centers now operating in 12 cities across 3 countries. What we've discovered, Emma continued, gesturing to the data displayed behind her, is that kindness is universal. It transcends culture, language, and borders. When we identify and support those who show compassion, despite their own struggles, we create a network of positive change that grows exponentially. The presentation included video testimonials from around the world. A teacher in Tokyo who had used her last savings to help a student's family, now running a massive educational support program. A small cafe owner in London who fed homeless people despite facing bankruptcy, now operating a chain of community-focused restaurants. A young entrepreneur in Mumbai who had given up his career to help rural communities, now leading a technological revolution in agricultural support. During the Q&A session, a representative from Sweden asked about the project's sustainability. Emma smiled, remembering how Mary had anticipated this very question. Kindness, when properly supported, creates its own ecosystem of sustainability. Every person we help becomes a helper themselves. It's not charity, it's community empowerment at its most fundamental level. After the presentation, Emma retreated to a quiet corner of the UN building. She pulled out Mary's locket, which she still wore every day, and opened it to read the familiar message. An unexpected tear rolled down her cheek. Not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude for how far they'd come. Her phone buzzed with a message from Officer Wilson back home. "You won't believe who we just identified for the program. Remember Tom Bennett's nephew? The one who was struggling with addiction? He just spent his last $20 buying meals for a homeless family. He had no idea we were watching." Emma smiled. The Foundation's identification process had become more sophisticated over the years, but its core principle remained the same: finding those rare individuals who chose kindness even when it cost them everything. That evening, at a dinner hosted by international supporters, Emma shared some news she'd been keeping under wraps. The Thomson-Roberts Legacy Project is entering a new phase, she announced. We're launching what we call the Global Kindness Network. Using artificial intelligence and social media monitoring, we'll be able to identify acts of extraordinary kindness anywhere in the world, in real time. The room buzzed with excitement as she explained how the technology would work, all while preserving the human element that made their program special. Mary used to say that kindness leaves fingerprints, Emma continued. Now we'll be able to trace those fingerprints across the globe. Later that night, in her hotel room overlooking the New York skyline, Emma opened her laptop to video chat with the staff back at the original Kindness Innovation Center. The building that had once been an abandoned warehouse now hummed with activity even at this late hour. "Boss, you're not going to believe this," Sarah, her assistant of 2 years, exclaimed. "Remember that story you told us about Mary sitting in the alcove? Someone just recreated that scene in front of every single one of our centers worldwide. They're calling it the Mary Thompson Challenge. People are sitting in public places, observing and rewarding random acts of kindness. Emma watched the social media feeds flooding in. Tokyo, London, Sydney, Mumbai, Cape Town. In every city with a kindness innovation center, people were taking up the challenge. The movement had taken on a life of its own, evolving beyond even what she had envisioned. 5 years had passed since Emma's last $10 changed her life, and the Thompson-Roberts Legacy Project had evolved into something that even Mary might have found hard to imagine. The Global Kindness Network, launched at the UN 2 years ago, had become a phenomenon that transcended borders, cultures, and social divisions. Emma sat in her office at the World Kindness Headquarters, the transformed building that had once housed the original Thompson Foundation. The walls were now covered with interactive screens showing real-time data from kindness innovation. Centers across 6 continents, each blinking light represented a new act of kindness being verified and supported. "Ms. Roberts," Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "The final numbers for the Mary Thompson Challenge are in. You might want to see this." The global social media campaign had exploded beyond their wildest expectations. What started as a spontaneous tribute had become an annual event, with millions of people worldwide spending one day observing and rewarding acts of kindness in their communities. "Pull up the global feed," Emma requested, and the main screen filled with images and videos from around the world. In New York, a group of former program recipients had taken over Times Square, creating a kindness flash mob. In Tokyo, an entire business district had transformed into a kindness observation zone. In Rio de Janeiro, favela residents were organizing their own micro-kindness detection networks. Jack Wilson entered the office, now silver-haired but still carrying the same leather briefcase. "The board meeting is about to start," he reminded her. "And Emma, they're all here." By all, he meant the original group that had been there at the beginning. Linda had flown in from London, where she now directed the European operations. Danny had taken a break from his speaking tour in Asia. Officer Wilson, now Chief Wilson, had made time despite his busy schedule. Even Mike from the diner, who now ran a chain of community-focused restaurants, had closed his businesses for the day to attend. The boardroom fell silent as Emma entered. On the wall behind her chair hung a large portrait of Mary Thompson, her clear blue eyes seeming to twinkle with their old sparkle. Below it, in elegant script, were the words that had started it all. "Sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as our hardest choices." 5 years ago, Emma began, a cold night and $10 changed everything. Today, we're not just changing lives. We're changing how the world thinks about kindness and community. She gestured to the screens showing their global impact. Over 1 million lives directly improved, 10,000 businesses saved, 100,000 students supported, and countless acts of kindness inspired and multiplied. But today isn't about numbers, she continued, pressing a button that changed the display. It's about Mary's final dream becoming reality. The screen showed a satellite view of the world, with points of light representing every verified act of kindness their network had detected. The lights began to connect, forming a web of compassion that spanned the globe. Mary believed that kindness could create a network strong enough to transform the world, Emma explained. She imagined a future where acts of compassion would be recognized, supported, and multiplied systematically. Today, I'm proud to announce that we've achieved that vision, and we're ready for the next step. She revealed the Foundation's most ambitious project yet, the Kindness Economy Initiative. It was a revolutionary system that would integrate with existing financial structures to create a parallel economy based on verified acts of kindness. Every act of giving, helping, or supporting others would generate kindness credits that could be used for real-world needs. Imagine, Emma said, her voice filled with passion, a world where your compassion literally becomes currency, where helping others doesn't just feel good, it helps you too. Mary always said that kindness multiplies. Now we're making that multiplication measurable and sustainable. The board members listened in awe as Emma detailed how the system would work. The artificial intelligence they'd developed could now identify and verify acts of kindness with 99.9% accuracy. The blockchain technology would ensure transparency and prevent abuse. Major corporations had already signed on to accept kindness credits alongside traditional currency. But most importantly, Emma concluded, touching the locket she still wore, we're ensuring that the heart of our mission remains pure. Just like that night when Mary sat in that alcove, watching and waiting for someone to show genuine compassion, our system will continue to prioritize authentic kindness over performative charity. As the presentation ended, Linda stood up with tears in her eyes. Mary would be so proud, she said softly. We've turned her final test into a global movement. Danny added, and we're just getting started. The next generation is growing up. In a world where kindness isn't just a virtue, it's a viable way of life. 10 years to the day since Emma gave her last $10 to Mary Thompson, she stood in the grand auditorium of the Global Kindness University, the world's first educational institution dedicated entirely to the study and implementation of systematic kindness. The building itself was a marvel, its architecture inspired by the ripple effect that had started it all, with concentric circles expanding outward from a central point. A decade ago, Emma addressed the inaugural class of Kindness Innovation graduates. I was a waitress with empty pockets and a full heart. Today, I stand before you as living proof that kindness isn't just a nice gesture. It's the most powerful force for change in our world. The Kindness Economy Initiative, launched a year ago, had revolutionized how society viewed and valued compassion. The data displayed on the massive screens behind Emma told the story. Over 100 million kindness credits distributed, 50,000 businesses participating, and an estimated economic impact of $50 billion in traditional currency. But it was the individual stories that truly showcased the transformation. Sarah, Emma's former assistant, now ran the Global Kindness Network's technology division. Her team had developed an AI system that could predict where acts of kindness would be most impactful, allowing them to deploy resources proactively rather than reactively. Danny Martinez, once a young man who gave his last dollars to help a stranger, had become a global ambassador for the movement. His TED Talk, The Mathematics of Kindness, had been viewed over 100 million times, inspiring a new generation to see compassion as a quantifiable force for change. What we've created, Emma continued, gesturing to the graduates in their sustainable bamboo gowns, is more than a program or an organization. We've created a new way of living. The kindness economy isn't just an alternative to traditional capitalism, it's the evolution of human cooperation. The proof was in the data. Cities with high kindness credit circulation showed significant drops in crime rates, improved mental health statistics, and stronger community bonds. The system had even caught the attention of several Nobel laureates, who were studying its potential as a model for sustainable social development. After the ceremony, Emma took a quiet moment in her office, the same room where Mary had once planned her social experiments. The original alcove between the diner and bookstore was now part of the Kindness History Museum, preserved exactly as it had been that cold January night. A notification popped up on her desk's holographic display. The first kindness credit transaction had just been completed on the International Space Station. Astronauts from 5 different countries had collaborated to create a zero-gravity kindness observation pod, extending the network's reach beyond Earth itself. Ms. Roberts, her new assistant's voice came through. They're ready for the global broadcast. Tonight was special, the launch of the Interplanetary Kindness Initiative. As humanity reached for the stars, the Thomson-Roberts Legacy Project was ensuring that kindness would be a fundamental part of space exploration and colonization. The broadcast reached billions of viewers across Earth and the space station. Emma shared the stage with world leaders, scientists, and former recipients of the program's help. But the most powerful moment came when she played a recently discovered recording of Mary Thompson, made just days before their fateful meeting. I believe, Mary's voice filled the global airwaves, That somewhere out there is a person who will give their last $10 to help a stranger. And that person will show us how to change the world. Tears flowed freely in the audience as Emma responded, "Mary, we found not just one person, but millions. Your test of kindness became a template for global transformation." The broadcast concluded with the announcement of the next phase, the Kindness Inheritance Program. Every child born anywhere in the world would receive a kindness credit account, ensuring that the next generation would grow up understanding the tangible value of compassion. As Emma walked home that evening, she passed countless shops displaying their kindness credit acceptance signs alongside traditional currency symbols. Street corners where homeless people had once huddled were now home to kindness exchange stations, where anyone could give or receive help with dignity and transparency. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jack Wilson. Mary's great-granddaughter just completed her first kindness credit transaction. She gave her lunch money to a classmate who forgot theirs. The ripple continues. Emma smiled, touching the locket that had never left her neck. Inside, Mary's message had faded slightly with time, but its impact had only grown stronger. Keep the ripples going. 20 years after that fateful January night, Emma Roberts stood in the observation deck of Kindness Tower, the world's tallest building and headquarters of the now global Thomson Roberts Foundation. Below her, the city sparkled with lights, each one representing countless acts of kindness tracked by their advanced monitoring system. "Grandmother Emma," a soft voice called. Emma turned to see Maria, her adopted daughter's child, holding a tablet displaying the latest kindness economic report. At 17, Maria embodied everything the foundation had fought to create, a generation that saw kindness not as an optional virtue, but as the very foundation of society. The Mars colony just reported their first 1,000,000 kindness credits. "Distributed," Maria announced excitedly. "They're saying the harsh environment actually makes people more likely to help each other. The system's working even better there than it does on Earth." Emma smiled, remembering Mary's words about how adversity often brings out the best in people. The foundation now operated on 6 continents and 3 planetary colonies, with plans for expansion to the Europa settlement within the next decade. The kindness economy had become the dominant global financial system, with traditional currency serving as a backup rather than the primary means of exchange. "Have you visited the museum today?" Emma asked her granddaughter. The original diner, an alcove where it all began, had been preserved as the centerpiece of the International Museum of Compassion. Millions of visitors each year came to see where a simple $10 act of kindness had sparked a global revolution. Together, they took the gravity lift down to street level. The city had transformed over the years. Where there had once been advertisements promoting consumption, now there were holographic displays showing real-time acts of kindness happening around the world. The old competition-based economy had given way to what historians called the cooperation revolution. Inside the museum, they walked past the familiar exhibits: Mary's original cardboard sign, Emma's waitress uniform, the first kindness credit ever issued. But they were headed to a new installation, one that Emma hadn't yet seen. Maria had been working on it as part of her school project. "We call it the butterfly effect chamber," Maria explained as they entered a darkened room. Suddenly, they were surrounded by a 3-dimensional hologram showing the ripple effects of that first $10 donation. Lines of light connected millions of points, each representing a life touched by the expanding wave of kindness. "Watch this," Maria touched a control panel. The display zoomed in on specific stories: a former recipient who had become a leading scientist developing clean energy solutions, a small act of kindness that had prevented a war between nations, the first human on Mars who had credited the kindness economy with making peaceful space exploration possible. Emma felt tears welling up as she watched. The metrics were staggering. Global poverty reduced by 80%. Conflict zones transformed into cooperation zones, mental health improvements, across all demographics. But it was the individual stories that still moved her most, just as Mary had known they would. A soft chime indicated a global announcement. Emma and Maria looked up at the main screen where Jack Wilson's grandson, now the Foundation's chief technology officer, appeared. "The Quantum Kindness Network is now online," he announced. "For the first time, we can predict where kindness will be needed before the need arises." Emma touched the locket around her neck, the same one Mary had left her all those years. I go inside. A small quantum chip now augmented the original handwritten message, connecting it to the global network while preserving its timeless truth. As they left the museum, they passed a group of students participating in the annual Mary Thompson Challenge. But now, instead of simply sitting and observing, they were equipped with advanced empathy sensors and neural networks that helped them understand and respond to human need with unprecedented precision. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Emma said to Maria as they watched the young people at work. "I think about what would have happened if I had walked past Mary that night, if I had chosen to keep my $10. Maria squeezed her grandmother's hand. "But you didn't. And now none of us ever have to make that choice again. The system ensures that kindness is always the most valuable currency." That evening, Emma gave her final public address before retiring from active leadership of the Foundation. The holographic audience stretched across planets and space stations, united by the network of compassion that had grown from a single act of kindness. 20 years ago, she began, a cold night and $10 changed everything. But what really changed the world wasn't the money. It was the choice to see the humanity in another person. Mary Thompson showed us that kindness isn't just nice, it's necessary. And now, as we reach for the stars, we carry that lesson with us. As she spoke, the Global Kindness Index reached an all-time high. Somewhere, in every corner of human civilization, someone was choosing to help another person. The ripples had become a tidal wave of positive change. 50 years after Emma Roberts gave her last $10 to Mary Thompson, humanity celebrated the golden jubilee of the kindness revolution. The celebration took place simultaneously across Earth, Mars, Europa, and the newly established Titan outpost, connected through quantum channels that transmitted not just images and sounds, but emotional resonance. Emma, now in her 80s, but still sharp as ever, sat in a hover chair at the center of the Global Kindness Archives. Around her, a new generation of leaders gathered to witness a historic moment, the activation of the Universal Kindness Protocol, the culmination of everything that had started with a simple act of compassion half a century ago. "Before we proceed," Emma said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of wisdom, "I want to share something I've never told anyone." She opened the quantum-enhanced locket she'd worn for 50 years, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a piece of paper, perfectly preserved, the original $10 bill she had given Mary that cold January night. "Mary returned it to me in that final envelope," Emma explained, with a note saying, "This isn't just money anymore. It's proof that kindness is the most powerful force in the universe." The bill was scanned and its image projected across every kindness center in the solar system, a reminder of how the smallest actions can catalyze the greatest changes. The Universal Kindness Protocol represented the next evolutionary step in human cooperation, building on the success of the kindness economy. It would integrate compassion into the very fabric of human civilization. Every decision, from personal choices to interplanetary governance, would be evaluated through the lens of its kindness impact. "We've come so far," Emma continued, gesturing to the holographic displays showing humanity's progress. "From a world where kindness was seen as weakness, to one where it's our greatest strength. From a planet divided by greed, to a solar system united by compassion." The statistics told an extraordinary story. Poverty had been effectively eliminated throughout human space. Mental health metrics showed unprecedented levels of well-being, and conflict had become so rare that the very concept of war was studied only as historical curiosity. But even more remarkable were the unexpected developments. The kindness protocol had accelerated technological advancement by fostering unprecedented cooperation among scientists. It had made space exploration more efficient by replacing competition with collaboration. It had even helped humanity establish peaceful first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, as the aliens recognized and respected the unique social system humans had developed. And yet, Emma smiled, touching the old $10 bill. It all started with a choice. One person seeing another in need and choosing kindness over self-interest. As she spoke these words, the Universal Kindness Protocol activated. Human civilization, quantum computers began processing kindness data at unprecedented speeds, creating a new layer of reality where compassion became as fundamental as gravity, a force that shaped everything it touched. Maria, now a leading figure in the Foundation, stood beside her grandmother. "The protocol is showing something remarkable," she announced. "It's detecting kindness patterns we never knew existed, ways that small acts of compassion echo through time and space, affecting not just people but the very fabric of reality." The gathered leaders watched in awe as the quantum displays showed the true scope of kindness's impact, not just on human society, but on the universe itself. The protocol had detected what scientists were calling compassion waves, ripples, in the cosmic fabric that seemed to facilitate the very evolution of consciousness. Mary Thompson once sat in an alcove, looking for one person who would give their last $10 to help a stranger, Emma said, her voice strong despite her years. She found not just one person, but the key to humanity's next step in cosmic evolution. Here's part 13, A New Beginning, approximately 1,000 words. In the year 2075, 100 years after Emma Roberts gave her last $10 to Mary Thompson, humanity gathered for a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. Not just on Earth, but across the solar system and into the newly established interstellar colonies, billions of people united to commemorate what historians now called the kindness singularity. Emma had passed away peacefully 5 years earlier, at the age of 95, but her presence was felt everywhere. Through advanced holographic technology, her image stood at the center of the Thompson-Roberts Memorial Plaza, sharing space with Mary's hologram, two women whose chance encounter had reshaped human destiny. Maria, now in her 60s and serving as the global director of the Foundation, stood before the assembled crowd. The plaza, once a simple city block containing a diner and bookstore, now sprawled across an entire district of the city. At its heart, the preserved alcove where it all began had become humanity's most visited historic site. "My grandmother," Maria began, her voice carrying to every corner of human civilization through quantum channels, "used to tell me that kindness isn't just an action. It's a force as fundamental as gravity. Today, we know she was right in ways even she couldn't have imagined." The latest scientific discoveries had revealed something extraordinary. The kindness protocol had begun affecting reality at the quantum level. Acts of compassion created measurable changes in the universe's underlying structure, leading to what physicists called compassion-enhanced quantum entanglement. "We've discovered," Maria continued, gesturing to the holographic displays showing real-time data from across known space, that kindness isn't just a human construct. It's a cosmic force that shapes the very evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. The evidence was undeniable. The first extraterrestrial civilizations humanity had contacted had been drawn to Earth precisely because they detected the unique quantum signature of the kindness protocol. What had started with $10 in a cold alcove had become a beacon for advanced species seeking to understand the power of compassion. As Maria spoke, the centennial celebration reached its climax. In every human settlement from the underwater, cities of Europa to the cave cities of Mars to the orbital habitats of Saturn, people participated in a synchronized act of kindness. The quantum sensors recorded the largest surge of compassion waves ever detected. My grandmother once told me, Maria smiled, touching her own locket, a quantum-enhanced replica of Emma's original, that she sometimes wondered what would have happened if she'd walked past Mary that night. But we don't have to wonder anymore. The protocol has shown us every possible timeline, and in each one where humanity survives and thrives, it all begins with that single act of kindness. The celebration continued with the announcement of the next phase in human evolution, the integration. Building on a century of kindness-driven development, humanity would begin actively incorporating compassion into its technological and biological evolution. The boundaries between giving and receiving, between self and other, would blur in ways that would have seemed impossible 100 years ago. But even as we reach for the stars, Maria concluded, we must remember where it all began, with one person seeing another in need and choosing kindness over self-interest. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, ripples through the cosmos, touching lives we may never know. As the centennial celebration drew to a close, a young child approached the original alcove. In her hand, she held a crisp $10 bill. Following a tradition that had developed over the decades, she placed it in the quantum preservation field, alongside countless others, each representing a promise to keep the ripples of kindness flowing through time and space. The story of Emma and Mary had become more than history. It had become humanity's guiding star, leading our species toward a future where kindness wasn't just an option, but the very essence of what it meant to be human. Here's part 14. The final chapter, approximately 1,000 words. In the year 2100, at the dawn of the 22nd century, humanity paused to reflect on the most transformative journey in our species' history. The Thomson-Roberts legacy, which began with a simple $10 act of kindness, had become the cornerstone of human evolution. The world now barely resembled the one where Emma Roberts had first met Mary Thompson in that fateful alcove. Maria, in her final years as global director of the foundation, stood before an audience that spanned not just space, but dimensions. Through advanced quantum consciousness technology, even beings from parallel universes had gathered to study what they called the kindness phenomenon. We stand here today, Maria began, her voice carrying across realities, not just as witnesses to history, but as living proof of my grandmother's belief that kindness is the most powerful force in existence. We've seen it transform not just our world, but our very understanding of reality itself. The latest breakthrough had shocked even the most optimistic scientists. The kindness protocol, now integrated into the fabric of human civilization for decades, had begun showing signs of affecting time itself. Acts of compassion created what researchers called temporal kindness loops, ripples that echoed both forward and backward through time. We've discovered, Maria explained, gesturing to the multidimensional displays, that every act of kindness creates connections not just across space, but across time. When Emma Roberts gave her last $10 to Mary Thompson, she didn't just change her future, she created a resonance that touched both past and future generations. The evidence was extraordinary. Historical records began showing subtle changes, revealing previously undocumented acts of kindness that had always existed but had somehow become more visible as humanity's consciousness evolved. It was as if the universe itself was being transformed by the accumulated weight of compassion. In the preserved alcove, now a nexus point for temporal kindness waves, visitors reported extraordinary experiences. Some claimed to see echoes of Emma and Mary's first meeting, playing out over and over across different timelines. Others reported feeling connected to every act of kindness that had ever occurred or would occur. But perhaps most remarkably, Maria continued, we've begun to understand that kindness isn't just a human trait we're developing. It's the universe's way of knowing itself, of healing itself, of evolving. Every act of compassion is actually the cosmos becoming more conscious of its own interconnected nature. The celebration reached its climax with the activation of the universal kindness resonance, a quantum field that would allow every human being to directly experience the impact of their acts of kindness. For the first time, people could literally see how their compassion affected others across time and space. My grandmother once sat in a diner, counting her last $10. Maria smiled, tears gleaming in her eyes. She couldn't have known that she was setting in motion events that would transform not just our species, but reality itself. And yet, somehow I think both she and Mary knew that kindness was more than just a choice. It was the key to our evolution. As the century turned, humanity prepared for its next great leap. The kindness protocol had revealed that consciousness itself was evolving through acts of compassion, leading to what scientists called the ultimate understanding, the realization that kindness wasn't just a human behavior, but the fundamental force binding all reality together. In the quantum-preserved alcove, now a sacred site for visitors from across the multiverse, a holographic display showed the simple truth that had started it all. A young waitress, an elderly woman, and $10 that changed everything. The story of Emma and Mary had transcended history to become something eternal. A reminder that in every moment, we face the same choice that Emma faced that cold January night. And in choosing kindness, we don't just change lives, we transform reality itself. Up next, you've got 2 more incredible stories waiting for you right on your screen. If you found this tale of transformation powerful, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Click now to discover more stories that will touch your heart and remind you of the strength of the human spirit.